Welcome to HarmonyTALK, a podcast about dreamers and doers. We talk to people from all walks of life and hear them tell us about their dreams, how they fulfilled them, and the moment they knew there was no turning back. This podcast is sponsored by AM Skyer, a third-generation family insurance business started in 1920. I'm your host, Todd Stephens. My guest today has been called one of the best jazz guitarists ever, and Downbeat magazine described him as a poet on the jazz guitar. He shared the stage with the likes of the one and only Miles Davis, Chick Corea, and Michael Brecker. Yes, today we welcome guitarist extraordinaire David Becker to the program. One of his most recent projects, Planets, sprung out of a musical collaboration with the Space Channel. Through his live performances, audience members are guided through an astral plane of audio-visual immersion. But his journey began decades ago, growing up in a family ripe with musical tendencies. As a young multi-instrumentalist, one may be surprised to hear that the guitar wasn't his first instrument of choice. Joining with his brother, they formed the David Becker Tribune. He's released more than 20 recordings, many of which have topped the jazz and contemporary charts, by the way, earning him both Grammy and Emmy nominations. He's toured more than 40 countries and performed in 44 of the 50 states. If that doesn't keep him busy enough, he's an author, and he offers workshops all over the world, sharing his talents with those who hope to advance theirs. David Becker, welcome to HarmonyTALK.
Thanks, Todd. Great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on the program, and I have to say that your music has inspired so many, and I thank you for the time and effort that you put into it over the last few decades. So thank you on behalf of all the fans.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Great. Well, you know, this program is about dreamers and doers, and you have certainly achieved both, I would say, throughout your career. But was it always your dream to become a professional musician?
From very early on, no. I wanted to be an airline pilot. So that was because I've traveled a lot as a kid. My father worked for the airlines, and my mom being European, we traveled to Europe every year. And so I thought I was going to do that. But music came very naturally. And when I switched from trumpet to guitar, I remember one of my first guitar lessons with my guitar teacher. He just looked at me and said, well, you know, you're going to play music for your life, for your living. And I said, yeah. So that decision was kind of made for me in that second. And then I never looked back. But when I decided or made that decision, I only focused on that. And, you know, the title of your podcast is interesting because dreams are thoughts. So what is an idea? When you have an idea to do something, it has to start here in your head. And if you look at a automobile, a guitar, or anything that was created by somebody, it started with a thought. And that thought process began in that room when I was 15 and continued on and still continues on to this day, because as soon as you achieve something, your goal keeps getting further and further in the distance. And that's something I learned a long time ago. So I'm grateful that I had whatever it is that it takes to have the tenacity to continue to do that.
Well, that's amazing. And you mentioned 15 and starting on the trumpet. Was that just your instrument of choice when you first got into music, or how did the trumpet become a part of your life?
It's interesting because I started as a drummer. I got drumsticks and a little drum as a little boy, and I actually got a drum set when I was 9, a little toy drum set. I tried to take drum lessons when I was 10, and it didn't really fit with me with the rudiments. I could play, but I just didn't have the discipline. My brother actually was the guy who said, you know, you should go into the junior high band and pick an instrument. And so I had to figure out, was it saxophone, trombone, trumpet? And trumpet just seemed to speak to me because we had an Al Hirt record. So that I remember the cover that my dad got it from United Airlines. So it was a promo of Al Hirt on the cover with his trumpet, and there was the tail of the United Airlines. I think it was a 720. And that just, something about that made me go, well, I think I want to play trumpet. So that's why I chose the trumpet.
Now, was music always a big influence in your life growing up? Was it something the family was into, or how did music enter your life?
Yeah, my parents are music fans. My mother's family, the European family, were classical musicians. She played piano by ear, and my father was a aficionado. He had lots of different records and enjoyed music. He didn't play, but he had good pitch, and we just always collected records. My brothers and I being the youngest of three, my oldest brother is 6.5 years older than I am, so he was buying, Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin records when I was 8 or 9, when they were brand new, and I never really thought about it in stylistic terms. I just liked the music, and we bought Monkey records and Beatle records. My father took us to see Help when I was 5 or 4 in Detroit in a drive-in, and so they always had music around the house. And of course, my brother played piano from the time he was about 6. So every time we'd have company, they'd make him play for the company, and then the three of us would figure out a way to make music on whatever we had. And that continued on and when we became more, dedicated to one instrument and playing in a band together when I was in junior high and high school.
Wow, that's interesting that you had that progression, and it seems to, that Beatles experience, if you will, even though popular music somehow led you eventually to jazz. And I'm interested in how that worked. You mentioned, popular music, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix. What was it about jazz that really turned you on?
I think it was just the improvisational aspect of it. I mean, as a kid, the first album that I bought when I was 9 of my own, from my own money was a band called El Chicano, which was a local Chicano band from LA. And they had a hit called Viva Torado, which was a Gerald Wilson tune. It was an instrumental. And I didn't know it at the time, but the guitar player was influenced by Wes Montgomery. And of course, I didn't know Wes Montgomery then, but something about that sound, of that Latin sound with that guitar, just spoke to me. And I realized now, later on, when I got into playing guitar, that was the thread, that particular thing. And then, of course, being in the big band as a trumpet player, playing in the jazz chair and soloing, we had all these cool arrangements and we got to see Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich and all these great big bands. In fact, Louis Bellson's brother taught at the music store near my house where we got all our instruments. I bought my trumpet there. My brother bought his drums. We took lessons there. So that environment was very nurturing. And plus we had a great music teacher in the junior high, Ted Decker, who was a trombonist, mainly. He played other instruments, and he played with Stan Kenton and Harry James, and he knew all the local guys in town, so he was able to get these cool arrangements for the 13, 14-year-old kids. And then he also would encourage us to be a band and think about what it means to actually have a sound. And he would tell us things like, the glockenspiel only plays in bar 47, but if that wasn't there, the piece wouldn't be whole. And so we learned camaraderie. Even though each one of us had varying levels of ability, he made the band sound like a band. And every year we would have a concert at the end of the year, and they would record that and make an album out of it that the parents could buy and we could buy. And that was important, I think, for us to be able to really see what we did, what we accomplished in that time period. And I won the music award in 9th grade, which was called the Outstanding Achievement Award. I still have it sitting over my desk over here in 1976 or whatever it was. So
That's wonderful, and you've been obviously, received lots of accolades and Grammy nominations and Emmy nominations, but you still have that award from 9th grade.
yeah, I think that means more to me than anything else I've received, to tell you the truth, because it was something I worked very hard for. I knew in 7th grade that was a possibility to achieve that. And so I really had it in like what I talked earlier about having a focus of what do you want to achieve? The idea was there, and then I manifested it into reality. And I don't think I was shocked, but I was kind of like, wow, okay, if I really put my mind to something, I can achieve something. And that was a lesson for me, I think.
David, I notice a real sense of work ethic in your pursuit, whether it's, as a young man in 9th grade getting that award or obviously going on to be Emmy and Grammy nominated. And I know your mother has an interesting backstory and really survived quite a tumultuous time. How did that affect your work ethic? And is that where that comes from?
I think so, to a larger degree. I mean, my father had a strong work ethic and instilled that in us as children, but my mom was born in the Dutch East Indies as a Dutch national and grew up there and was interned in a prison camp for 4 years, along with her mother, younger brother, and stepfather. And to go through something like that is pretty horrific, especially at, the age of 12, going in and coming out at 16. And, she's still alive. She's 95. She's amazing. I think, as a child, I didn't think much about it in those terms because you hear prison camp and you think Hogan's Heroes or something, and you don't really realize. But when I started my quest as a musician, running around with little tapes in Europe to try to get a record deal, her best friend Edith, who's still alive, she's 95 as well. In fact, I just saw her with my wife Lori in Munich. Uh, I visited her and said, "Tell me a little bit about Indonesia. Tell me about the prison camp stories," because I knew a few of them, and it really got me interested in not only the history of it, but the personal experiences that they went through, and to be able to understand it from their firsthand accounts. And as I progressed as a musician and did my career, I always kept it in mind and made sure that I was always aware of more information. I talked to my uncle, I talked to other people that had information, and just accumulated it for myself. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that it always motivated me because I thought about how did they survive something like that. And I'm in a situation where, of course, as a musician, you have a lot of obstacles to overcome. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of uncertainty. But I'm sure that my mom's situation in the concentration camp was even more uncertain and terrible to have to deal with. So she managed to survive that. I can survive this.
It's a great perspective. I mean, when you think about the challenges we have, in day-to-day life, or like you said, the rejection or the hills we seem to have to climb, when you compare
Yes.
it to folks who went through those experiences, it's so nominal, right?
Yeah, and it's also my grandmother, who I did not know. She was, she had moved to the States after the war, when my mom immigrated in the 50s, and she got cancer and passed away 6 months before I was born. So I knew about her. She was a very strong woman, very strong-willed. She left home at 16 to marry my grandfather to go to Indonesia, and just her stories of what she went through always motivated me. I always felt a connection to her. And when I finally did the Batavia project, which is basically the musical story of what they went through on a recording, I really got to know her very well. I felt like she was kind of feeding me information. And since then, I've gone on to accumulate a lot more information just through sources that I have and try to keep that all alive. In fact, in our basement, we have a chest that has photos which my grandmother had from her German family and from the Indonesian days, which was almost confiscated by the Japanese. And luckily, she gave it to a Chinese woman to hold on to for her. And she didn't know how long she'd be gone and when she had to go report to Batavia. And then she was in a camp for 4 years, and she found that lady after the war had ended and was able to retain that and get it back in her possession. Because Edith told me that all the photos they had were all lost. They were all burned, and the only ones that were left were the ones that they had mailed to their family in the Netherlands. So I feel very fortunate to have that archives that we still have, in our possession.
When you mentioned Batavia, your project, and I know when you listen to that music, you seem to have a connection to those, not only that time, but those people. And it sounds like as you listen to that music came to you, and you almost translated those experiences into song, if you will.
Absolutely.
Is that how it felt to you?
Yes, yes. In fact, I was thinking about my grandmother. And I was sitting in a hotel room in Germany, and I had the guitar in my hands, and I just, in fact, I have my guitar right here. I can show you. So I
Yeah.
basically just picked it up, and I just, that came to me first, and I don't know where it came from. It just was there. And then, and that was it. I mean, and I had to play it. I kept playing it all night, saying, "Well, wow, there's something there." And as the project evolved, it sort of evolved kind of from the back door because I was living in Germany and I met some television people in Cologne, and my grandmother was born in Cologne. and they were interested in her story. So it was the first time I had to write down all those stories that I had been told, and it put it into a perspective where it gave me a lot more insight. And the project that they were going to do fell through, but that's why I decided to record the music. And each piece that I wrote for that album was based on a story that the music just came to me. It had to be that specific story. It had to be that specific musical vignette, whatever you want to call that. But Batavia is the main theme. In fact, we're going to go in the studio, I think, this year and record the um, the main piece, Batavia, with an orchestra, because I made orchestral arrangements to do a concert with the Metropole Orchestra in 2020, but we had the pandemic. So we had to push that back. And I was down in Mexico City with Ken Calais, and we met a studio down there. So we're talking about recording or re-recording Batavia with an orchestra. So that's something that's in the works.
That's an amazing story from your grandmother all the way through to what you just mentioned with going into the studio. And you mentioned Ken Calais of Fleetwood Mac fame, I believe,
Yes.
right? One of your regular collaborators. And I know you also appeared on Kobe Calais's a couple of albums that she has
Yeah.
done. So your music is really all over the place. I mean, whether, you're not just a jazz guitarist, if you will, but, do you a question I comes to mind with you is, do you play music because you want to, or do you have to? Do you have that in you and you just have to grab the guitar?
I think every musician, every composer, every improviser, I think it's part of their DNA that you have to express yourself through the instrument. And I don't really think about it that much anymore. When I'm having a conversation with you, or if I'm playing, it's the same thing. It's a mode of communication, and the instrument itself is just the vehicle in which I can get out those stories and those ideas of my vocabulary. But really, it's more about me just translating my personality and my thoughts and ideas at that given moment. And I think any musician, if you would talk to John Coltrane or Bill Evans or Jimi Hendrix, I think they probably would have said the same thing. So
It's a wonderful gift because those of us without that talent have to survive without without the ability to do that.
what I would say about that is, excuse me, is that, as a musician, when you're playing, you have to have someone who's going to listen to it. So those that don't have the ability to play the music are an integral part of the listening aspect. Because when I'm playing, I'm not, I'm not playing to play. I'm playing to listen. I'm a musical fan first and foremost. And what I'm trying to do is satisfy the fan in me. And that fan has a broad perspective of what I like in music. It's not just this narrow category of what you call jazz. And so that's why I'm able to do that. And of course, the listeners need to be there as well, because that inspires the player, and everybody gets up to be a piece of that. It's an integral part of music in general, because music was designed, I think, to be performed so that everybody could enjoy it, whether you're the performer or you're the listener or you're both.
Right. It's so well put. And, you mentioned, the fact that it's much more than just the artist, portraying that particular emotion at the time. But I've also heard you say that, you think of music in terms of colors and the
Yes.
visual aspect of music.
Right.
And I know that those often go hand in hand for certain performers. That seems big to you and really comes through in your work.
Well, it's interesting because I realized where that came from. When I was about 4 or 5, my parents, they had a big collection of classical records, and one of them was Edvard Grieg's Concerto in A minor. And I used to listen to that every day as a kid, and I would sit in front of the big stereo with a tinker toy and I would conduct. And I remember the passages that I heard. There was a painting on the wall that my parents had of the Zugspitze, which is the highest mountain in Germany. So it was this broad, white covered mountain, and on the side was kind of this little darker, crest that came up to the mountain. So whenever the major passages, major music, major chords would come, that's what I saw, was that mountain. And when the minor passages come, I imagined that darker piece. I didn't know that it was major and minor. I had no idea, but that was what I visualized. And as I
Uh-huh.
became more acquainted with music, then I started to realize what that was. And I do remember also sitting at the piano very early on, maybe I was 6 or 7, and I could play these chords, and I could understand the difference between major and minor, not from the keys, but from the color that they emoted. So I guess that's what it is. And for me, yeah, music is very visual. I see colors and images in my head when I play and when I hear things, and that's been true since very early on.
Now, was that helpful in I mentioned at the top of this that, your work, for planets was a partnership really with the Space Channel, and
Mhm.
was that visual aspect of music helpful to you or inspiring to you when you were asked to help create this?
Yes, and it's interesting because when I did the original Space Channel performance, I was asked to go into a theater and improvise a piece of music for each planet. I didn't have any visuals. I just had the name of the planet and a little bit of information. So I knew that Mars, whatever was made up of this, and Mercury was, revolved around the sun in 88 days, but I didn't have anything to look at. So I just, without thinking, I just started to play the first visuals in my head. And if you watch the first performance of Planets on the Space Channel program, and you listen to Gravitationally Bound, which is the album I did last year, there's a connection in a lot of the pieces. It's, for instance, Mars is almost note for note the same thing. And I don't know where it came from. Again, it's like Batavia. They were just, these images and ideas were just being fed. But one thing I do know is that I was prepared. We talk a lot about having the idea to do something and having the goal. One of the things about success, and for me, success is not how much money you make or how many records you sell. It's about completion. It's about finishing something you start. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have the means in which to be able to fulfill that. So you have to have the experience that you garner, and you have to be able to know that you can do something, or at least rely on the fact that you feel comfortable enough to try it. Because a lot of people are not afraid of success. They're afraid, I'm sorry, of failure. They're afraid of success. They're afraid of succeeding in something, so they have to do it. It's like, now you have to do it. It's like, if I could get there and stand in front of the middle of a stage with cameras on me and say, okay, Mars, and I freeze up and say, I can't do it, or I need a week to figure something out. I was in a position where I felt comfortable just to play and rely on those things that I had been doing the last however many years in my musical life that allowed me to do that because I felt comfortable in that environment. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. It's not overthinking it, because you could overthink it. If I sat down and said I have to write pieces for Mars and Jupiter, I probably would have overthought the process. But because it was spontaneous, I could rely on those elements of what I've garnered in my life of experience. And I think a lot of us, sometimes push that aside, but I think it's very important to realize that your experiences are what give you the ability to do something. And you have to always reach to those things in order to move forward.
And you're talking about planets, and you mentioned Gravitationally Bound, and I would love to talk about a couple of the tunes for a moment. But, when you think about planets without being familiar with your work, you could potentially think, well, it's space, what's really different? But, when you listen to each of your pieces, they're specifically attuned to that planet, and you've used different, I want to talk about, your techniques. But when I listen to Venus, and you've got some backing vocal in there, which
Mhm.
just takes you to another
Right.
place entirely. And you've also written some real whimsical things. Ellie's Joy is one that's older. I think it's a very nice upbeat tune. And then when I listen to Gravitationally Bound, there's something about it that it's familiar to me, and I don't know why, but there's a real familiarity and warmth in that song. So, just thinking about that, I wonder if I'm David Becker, do you ever write something or come up with something or improvise something and you think, "Geez, I'm never gonna top that."
Well, that's a good question, because as far as intensity of projects and compositions, I'd have to say that I'd put Batavia at the top. It's in the top 10 because of what it represented. It's a simple melody. It's not a complicated piece, but the arrangement is quite extensive and has a lot of parts to it. But, I think the thing is that we all we all have, as musicians and as songwriters or composers, we all have the same song that we're just trying to perfect. And I'm paraphrasing a couple of musicians who have said that. And I do believe that. I think we work with our vocabulary and our experiences and our influences, and you have to let the music come out. In the case of Gravitationally Bound, I was trying to demonstrate how the universe or the solar system is made up of the sun being this entity of energy that's just there. And all the planets revolve around it and move around it and do their independent motion, but they're connected. And so I started with one chord, which allowed me to be able to have that static chord in harmony and then build something that moved in different directions. And I wasn't thinking as far as like, well, I have to put D minor to C to G. I don't really think like that. I mean, I can look at those things. I'm listening for things, and I'm trying to respond to that color that when I play something, hey, that's okay, that's great. And if that moves me as the listener in that moment, then I know it's worth putting down. And as far as the topping or whatever you want to call that, I can't really worry about that too much because I have over 200 pieces of music that I've written and recorded. And when something comes that I like, I put it down, and I don't want to say, okay, well, that's in this category, that's category. It just is, it's David Becker music. So, and if it moves me first and foremost, and I can have the durability to play it a lot, and I feel like each time I play it, I want to play it more, that's a good sign.
It's inspiring, and it does move the listener also, as I'm sure you know, but as one listener, I can tell you that's the fact.
Thank you.
But I have to talk about your technique, or I want to ask you more about your technique because,
Sure.
you mentioned, the classic rock piece way back when you were a youngster, and I certainly grew up in that era as well. And I think the first time I saw Jimmy Page in The Song Remains the Same take a bow, to the guitar and create this sound that blew me out of the water. When I see your music, you use so many different modalities to play the guitar. It blows my mind. I've seen you use brushes, mallets, something that looks like a library card, weave between the strings, and you are a one-man orchestra in that effect, creating those tympanic sounds, percussive sounds. What inspired you to come off the pick or even finger picking and go into those different realms? Was it improvisation, or was it you were searching for something?
Kind of both. I started early on when I was playing with the Martin Guitar Company with Chris Martin doing clinics. I just was trying to find ways to get different sounds out of the instrument, which he liked and he encouraged. So I did that. And then later on, when I got this guitar, which is the David Becker original Heritage model, I had two pickups put into it. So the acoustic pickup allowed me to have a little bit more versatility behind the bridge and things like that. So it gave, and if you give me a second, I'll show you that. We'll take this card she talked about. This is the business card you're talking about. When I put it between the strings, all of a sudden I had a different timbre that I could actually, and that gave way to, this more sitar kind of sound. And so now I had all these different timbres that I like a lot of different kinds of things. I like to juxtapose things that normally don't go together, but in reality they do, because music is, the origins of music harmonically and rhythmically are all related. The planet Earth has this thing where the 6/8 rhythm is very inherent in all these different kinds of music, and harmonically, our system of music comes from Europe, from classical music. But if you listen to Mediterranean music and all these different things, Middle Eastern music, they all have a common thread. And I like that. I like listening to something from Africa or from, Egypt and going, wow, that reminds me of this. I can hear this. And if you look at anybody like John Coltrane or any Miles Davis, they all had their ears not tuned to just the bebop. They were listening to the whole planet and what resonated to them. And so I wanted to be able to do that. You were talking about brushes. I mean, I bought a pair of brushes for the tour last year because I thought, well, if I play, the percussion, I could do the same thing with those. So I got a pair of these, and suddenly I could, and so that gave me a whole new world of things as well too. So, because I am a percussionist or drummer, frustrated one at that, but I can still emote those ideas through the guitar. And this guitar is very versatile, and that's the thing. Having had it now for over 35 years and played so many different things on it, it has a lot of potential because it's made out of wood and metal and has all these different possibilities. And so when I had it made for me, I didn't know what the possibilities were, but now I do. I'm exploring them and finding more and more ways to get a lot more mileage out of what it can do.
I also want to mention looping, because what you just did there with the percussion, you put everything together in your
Yes.
live performances that I've seen anyway.
Yeah.
Where at the end of the experience, you're like, I just listened to a whole orchestra.
Well, that's it. Looping allowed me to do that. I mean, I can start, take that little percussion thing, and I'll do one for you here. Let me hang on a second. So. Now I've got that, and now I'm ready to do whatever I'm going to do,
Yeah.
So it allows a lot of potential of things. And I use 2 loop pedals because, and they're not synced. Everything that I do in the Planets project is live and nothing is pre-recorded. I want to keep it that way because, I want to be able to get all these different sonic things. But when I'm playing like that, I'm actually, again, I'm the listener listening, and I'm really aware of the dynamics of each instrument, the different tonalities that are created by those sounds that I'm making. They all fit sonically someplace, and I'm seeing them in my visualization in my head where they want to fit. And that's how a lot of what I did initially came to fruition. And now when I do the show, obviously I have more or less parts that are there that will do that. And also the EBow you talked about, that's this thing here, which they've been around since the 70s, but I, wanted to have the violin. And that's opened a whole new world for me too, because when I play that thing, I'm thinking like a violinist, not a guitar player. So it changes my perception of what I'm doing because I don't want to just be the guitarist. And that goes back to my junior high days of my teacher telling us each one of you has a role to make the sum of the parts, and they're all important. So when I'm doing this thing by creating all these different things in Planets, that's what's happening is I'm doing that in real time on one instrument, one guy, but I'm still thinking like I'm an orchestra. So.
Yeah. Well, it certainly comes across that way as well to your audience, I can tell you that. But it's amazing. And thank you for showing us that, because
Sure.
those techniques, and I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about techniques, because the other thing I'm so impressed with is that not only have you obviously been a performer for decades and recording artist, but also you write on technique and you give masterclass workshops really around the world. I know you just got back from Europe. What inspires you to give back, David?
I think it's that experience that I had in junior high, Ted Decker, and that music program, because he was somebody who could convey really important information, and not just the nuts and bolts of, what notes go with what chord and all that, but just the overall philosophy of playing music, what that means. And he told us lots of stories about musicians. I remember him telling us the story about Lester Young and Charles Mingus. Charles Mingus wrote Goodbye Pork Pie Hat for Lester Young, and stories about Miles Davis and about Charlie Parker. And we were just little kids, 12, 13 years old. We had no idea what that was. And also he talked about Beethoven. He talked about Mozart. He knew a lot about these things. And I think for me, when I teach, first of all, music and the language of it, the dialects that people call them styles. Style to me is clothing. To me, music is dialects. It's like a language. And of course, I grew up with, several languages, English, of course, and then Dutch and German. And I speak Dutch and German. So when I talk about playing music, I talk about conveying the vocabulary and learning how to do that to be able to get a result out of something. It's not to be a virtuoso, but if you want to learn to speak Italian and you want to go to Florence, you want to walk into the little bar and order a cappuccino and get a cappuccino and not have the guy look at you like you're from Mars. And that's really what I utilize is like, okay, and I can talk about a lot of things. I mean, I've learned a lot, but ultimately my thing is to try to get somebody to understand the way they understand and not one size fits all. Play that scale and you'll be able to play. No, no, no. You have to be able to make music and understand how to make statements and make stories on your instrument. And that's where it starts for me is that. So whatever the vehicle is, whatever the kind of music, if it's a jazz standard, if it's a blues tune, whatever, you have to be able to figure out how to maneuver in that environment. And there are things that go with that, dialectically and vocabulary wise, but you also have to dig deep to figure out who you are as a person and find that voice and see how you can add to the puzzle, whatever that is.
Well, it's a great segue because, we really like Harmony Talk to be educational, and I got a quick speed round for you on some things that could help our listeners. So, my first question, you mentioned it earlier, is, being an artist for this long, how do you handle rejection?
Wow, that's an interesting thing because, I talked earlier about success and failure and all that stuff. And really, I think it doesn't get easier. I mean, if I get rejected from something now, um, yeah, maybe I have a thicker skin to let it roll off. But you have to look at it this way. Somebody's rejection to you is not reflective of who you are, what you do. It's reflective of their opinion of what you do. And Ralph Towner, the great guitarist, composer, said once, we make records, and that's what people think we sound like. And it's true. You see a photograph of somebody in 1978, you go, well, that's the guy. And you see them in 1999 and they look different, but they still look a little the same. We evolve. And what you have to do is you have to just pick yourself up and move forward. If somebody says no or something doesn't go, I can tell you many, 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 many stories if we had hours about things that I wanted to do that didn't come to
Sure.
fruition. And then 2 years later, it happened without me thinking, without me having to do anything. So I think what you have to do is always look at whatever you're doing. You have to pick yourself up and move forward. Keep going. Keep completing the task, because ultimately things will evolve out of that. There's no guarantee that anything you do is going to do anything more than what it is. But the fact that you completed that project, that you wrote that piece of music, that you recorded that piece of music, or that you learned to play that song, or that you went and played a gig or whatever, you made a CD that's important. Always look at that as like, okay, I completed this, but that's not the end all. Because then there's the next step. I remember as a kid, I never thought that I'd get a major record company to record my music. That was the furthest thing from my mind. And I ended up on one of the largest recording labels, MCA, at age 23. And it all happened so quickly, but it happened through these different things that I had done. I never would have thought that possible. And it wasn't my goal. I just wanted to get my music out there. So you never know what's going to come, but you just have to keep focusing on what you're doing and not let the rejection get you down. I mean, we're all human beings and we have feelings and stuff, but a guy told me a long time ago, a record company guy, said, there's no accounting for personal taste. And that I've learned. So you have to go with, I like it. It's me. I'm going to keep doing this. And eventually, if you just are perseverant enough and you do the work, you just can't sit there and say, I want this, but you have to do the work at the same time. You have to work on your craft. If you do that at the same time as persevering, things will happen.
That's wonderful. Well, so many dreamers and doers are so passionate about what they do and put the time in extraordinarily. The last question I have for you, and one that I like to ask all of our guests, is, what do you do in your downtime?
Well, when I have time off, I enjoy spending time with my wife, Lori. We were in Florence for 3 days and we, enjoyed the city. I like traveling, even though it's tedious and I get to do it for my work. We say we get paid to travel because we love to play music, but I enjoy the aspect of
Yeah.
traveling. I've done it since I was 2 years old. International travel started very early for me. My father took us to Europe. I think I made 10 trips by the time I was 10, or 9 trips, and saw lots of things and spent, a month there each year, or sometimes 2 months. And so it's in my blood. So a big part of me is just enjoying where I'm at. Or if I'm sitting on my back, deck looking at the cornfield or the bean field this year, I try to enjoy that. So
David, you've been at this since the early 80s. What's next for you?
I just am grateful to still be doing this after so many years. I have a new project coming out in July with Paul Wertico, who was the drummer with Pat Metheny for many years. We did a duo project. It's called Tuxedo Man. I'm going to continue to do concerts for Planets Live. The Batavia project is in the works as well, with the orchestra. And just whatever comes my way, I'm just always grateful to be able to continue to do what I do, and I never take anything for granted. So when I get the opportunity to go, like I'm going to New Zealand next year for the Jazz and Blues Festival in Palmerston North for a week, and I go with the flow. Whatever comes, I'm grateful for. But I'm looking forward to the record with Paul coming out. It's a really cool project. It's coming out on vinyl as well, which is the first vinyl I've had in over 35 years. So, and that record has an interesting story behind it as well. So, I'm just happy to do whatever comes my way and continue. I hope that people will check out the Planets Project live and Gravitationally Bound. It's the first album in immersive sound, so you can get the surround sound version. Also, a stereo version is available of that, and the concert is really, really a unique performance. For me, it's a pleasure to do it because I'm just in the midst of this media thing with the visuals and the music, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's terrific. I would encourage everyone out there to look up David Becker, davidbeckertribune.com. And I assume you're on social media. So where can people find you, David?
They can find me on Facebook. There's a David Becker fan page. My wife, Lori, takes care of that. You can join that. On Instagram, it's basically it's Dabetrib, which is like David Becker Tribune. Dabetrib is the what do you call it? The abbreviation for that on Instagram. And of course, on YouTube, there's a page that we have. And I do have some educational things there. I also try to keep some of the planets things going and whatever things happen there. There's quite a number of little concert footage of the Planets project from last year from various concerts. People can check that out to see that. And there'll be more stuff coming as the year progresses. So.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I would encourage everyone, if you stream music, just ask your device to play David Becker, and you'll get some amazing tunes randomly if you stream, and you'll be surprised. I encourage everyone to go out and check it out at your earliest convenience. So, David, thank you very much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time and your talents.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Todd. Thank you for having me.